Before we start importing images into a project, there are a few things in the preferences we need to have a look at first. First one is still image default duration. This decides how many frames an image will last when it is dropped into the timeline. It's set up as 150 frames as default, so if you're working at 25 frames per second, each image will last 6 seconds. Don't worry, you can change the length of anything you want once the image is on the timeline. But if you're placing large numbers of images onto the timeline or want to create an image sequence, you can change this preference to give you the results you want. The other preference is default scale to frame size. When turned on, this preference automatically resizes a video or image so that it fits the dimensions of the sequence you're working at. So if you have an image larger than the sequence settings that you're working at in Premiere Pro, Premiere Pro will downsize the image to fit the frame. This isn't good if you want to go in and zoom or crop the image later, as you would have lost resolution that was there with the original image. It's quite handy though if you are mixing together lots of different sizes of videos, say from mobile phones, flip cams, video cameras, anything like that, so that the largest size is no bigger than the project sequence settings. Importing. You can import photos just like any other files by going to File, Import. However, a much more powerful way of finding what you're looking for is on offer inside the media browser. Click on the media browser and hit the tilde key to get into full screen mode. Once in the media browser, you can filter what appears. So if you want to look at only JPEGs, you can choose this from the menu on the top right hand side. Scaling. Once you have your images in the project, you can start to position them on the timeline. If you drag and drop an image onto the timeline, chances are it'll be much bigger than the frame size of the video you're working with. If you haven't checked the default scale to frame size preference, the image won't change and we'll end up seeing a small section of the image. To remedy this, you can right click on the image and choose Scale to Frame. This will downsize the image to fit the video frame. Now, if you perform any scaling from this point on, it will be doing so to a downsized version of the original image. This means it will scale it up to fill the frame and you will have lost quality over the original image. A better workflow would be to turn off scale to frame. The image will revert back to being far too big for the frame, and you can now use the scale controls in the motion tab to make the picture fit the frame. This will be done without downsizing the image, so you will not lose any quality. Reposition. Whenever the image you're using is larger than the video frame size you have, the option of repositioning the image to change what is cropped out of the image and what appears on screen. To move the image up, down, left, right, use the motion tab. If you click on the icon next to where it says motion, you create a bounding box around the image in the program view, and you can now use your mouse to reposition the image manually. Moving across an image in a kind of pan or zoom relies on a basic understanding of keyframes. These are essentially frames where you specify exactly how the picture should be scaled and positioned, and then you work down the timeline, create another set of scale and position measurements, and the computer will work out how to get from one point to the other. You can create keyframes by pressing the stopwatch icon next to the parameter that you want to animate. You can then move your playhead further down the timeline and change the parameters and add another keyframe. Exporting an image. Premiere Pro has a neat little feature to quickly create still images from your video project. Position the playhead over the frame you want to export and then press the camera button in the button bar below the program monitor. You can then choose a file format and destination. If you're going to reuse the image in a video project, JPEG format will be absolutely fine. If you think the image is going to end up getting printed, you probably want to choose a format with higher resolutions such as TIFF or PNG. Photoshop files. Premiere Pro works great with Photoshop, and there are a number of options available to you when importing Photoshop files. When you choose to import a Photoshop document file, when you choose to import a Photoshop document or .psd file, you're dealing with files that contain many layers and have many different sizes. If you simply want to use the whole file as an image, you want to choose Merged All Layers from the Import checkbox. This will give you a flattened or merged version of the .psd file. If you choose the second option, Merged Layers, you can choose which layers are included in the final file. This is handy if you want to leave out some elements on the .psd file. The next option is individual layers. This allows you to bring in a selection of individual layers that will reside onto your timeline. The next option is sequence, which will create a new sequence with all the layers in it. This is useful if you want to animate any layers separately to others. If you get a .psd file into a project and you want to edit it in Photoshop, you can right click on the file and choose edit in Photoshop. This will boot up Photoshop and you'll be able to manipulate the file in there. Once saved in Photoshop, it will update on the timeline in the Premiere Pro file. Very handy way of working and round tripping from Premiere Pro to Photoshop.